Hey, Miguel Iturrate back here on the CLP, and I am joined by the Fighters Corner's Mike Davis. Mike, how you doing?
Miguel, for this special event, I put on my finest Fedor Emelianenko sweater. Look at
Look at that.
that. Dude,
Definitely looking a little fake. You confused me.
prepared.
And
That's how I am today.
we are going to talk. Mike's from the Fighters Corner podcast. You can check them out on YouTube and on all the podcast platforms. Incredible interviews and a bunch of stuff like that. And he's joining me to talk about the huge BMF title fight from last night. Masvidal versus Diaz went down in Madison Square Garden, Mike. And controversial ending, not an ending that made anyone happy. So we leave it with that. How'd you take the whole thing?
Well, all right. Well, obviously we do an MMA podcast and we do a boxing podcast. We keep them separate. But unfortunately, this answer is going to have to kind of bleed into the two of them. So, as we both know, that the UFC and the WWE, they share a lot of executives, and a lot of them kind of cross between both organizations. They pollinate, is I think is the business term that's used with the people that work there. And the BMF title, in my opinion, is the first foray into the world of mixed martial entertainment. I mean, it's a made-up belt. And I'll tell you what, the hype behind that belt surpassed probably what a normal championship belt would have.
That's Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, look at the hype behind it. So on top of that, the fight absolutely lived up to the hype. But more importantly, what you saw was a made-up fictional title with a fancy, edgy name, which I was shocked that they actually went with the real name. Forced a world title bout in boxing to wait in its entirety until they were finished so they can start the other main event. And that's the most shocking part. Last night, what we saw was boxing, was what the term would be bending the knee to MMA. And that's what we saw. That's outside of the fight game. That, in my opinion, is much larger than anything that took place in the octagon that night.
To add to that, and I was watching an interview with Dana White while they were waiting in Vegas, which took them an hour and a half, of wait time from one fight to the Canelo fight while they waited for the UFC to finish. So, while they waited for all of that, they had an hour and a half to kill at the arena, the team, in Vegas, and the Vegas people called the UFC, pulled strings, and made it happen. And the crowd for the Canelo fight actually got to watch the UFC main event fed to them while they waited for that. And that was something, I guess favors were called in, and Dana was actually, surprised too, because that was a new step for them in terms of their business model, and he made it happen. And, he was talking about that as well.
On that. If you're Dana White, you'd be,
we know he doesn't love Oscar either, and he got to take his shots there. And, definitely, I think he felt, like you said, that he was having the knee bended too. And you also said Masvidal and Diaz delivered. So let's talk a little bit about what went down in the ring first, and then we'll get into the aftermath. And maybe, how bad is the New York State Boxing Commission? I know you love this subject.
Well, antiquated is the word. They failed on multiple levels. With the at the weigh-ins, they had issues with one of the fighters leaning on one of his coaches, which is as plain as day. And I'm not so sure on the cut stoppage. I'm not so sure that was bad. He had a chunk of his skin just flip up, like you could see the skull on the cut. Here. You can make the argument about Tyson Fury, obviously another boxing parallel, him being allowed to, to fight past, another additional 9 rounds after suffering a massive cut, which in my opinion was worse than Nate Diaz. But at the end of the day, you know what, man? Run it back. I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. What's your opinion? Let's just pretend Nate Diaz wins. What's his next fight? If Nate Diaz won.
here's the problem with the whole thing, and I think you pointed it out a little bit in the intro. It felt a lot like, I think The Rock was the guy who said, who just come out, Rock, I know you think you're going to run for president and that you're worth a couple $100 million at this point and stuff like that. Go ahead and say baddest motherfucker. Just say it, baddest motherfucker. I mean, that's the belt. But he said baddest mother effer. You know what I mean? And that's the thing is at the end of the day, the hype and the stuff like that and the presentation of the fight, it wasn't meant to end that way. And I know the karma and this and that and the other stuff. But Diaz is a guy with, his post-fight reaction too and stuff. It's just, to me, you could take the Robbie Lawler path, where Robbie Lawler came out afterwards and said, yeah, I disagree, but he's doing his job and but that's not Nate. Nate's not going to say, well, so his reaction kind of, everybody's going to go with the two fighters, And in that case, it all goes awry because you don't know, there's really no one to blame. How can you say the doctor, well, just don't do your job? You know what I mean? So you're in a real tough spot. But I think it really does affect the fact that, at the end of the day, it was very contrived. And, what could have been a good contest got all this other hype added to it. And at the end, it doesn't live up to that expectation. What are they going to do? Run it back again? Where?
Yeah, probably Vegas. To be honest with you, I really enjoyed the fight. I'm not going to say I didn't. I thought the entire card in its entirety was phenomenal, in my opinion. It was one of the better UFCs I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with you. Just really quick, sticking to the fight. The problem too there is that the script was perfectly written, right? Because Diaz wants to be in rounds 4 and 5. Masvidal looked like he was slowing down a little bit, but
not much.
He was still pretty sturdy, and he was looking at, as he put it in his post-fight conferences, finish painting his masterpiece kind of thing. And so he was robbed of his chance. Diaz felt like the fight was just getting started, and the fact that half his face is falling off doesn't really affect him anymore. And he also said, you sneeze on me and I'll bleed. So it's the kind of thing where, like I said, the whole presentation made for a bad setup. It actually puts the doctor in a bad situation, right? So, but
you also got to look at how the start. First punch, Diaz started he got cracked hard and he started bleeding. We've seen that in Diaz's past. Look at the Melvin Gillard fight. First punch, Diaz is in trouble, and he kind of works his way out of it.
He's always bloody.
Yeah, but I mean, the patience showed by Masvidal is what I think has been missing earlier in his career. I bet you a few of his losses wouldn't have went that way had he shown the patience that he is now, in his current state of fighting. Yeah, he's very more impressive now than I've ever seen him in the past.
Yeah, he was confident, and I say confident, not cocky, because he's right there, But confidence comes from knowing you're pretty good. I thought it was funny. He laughed during the fight. Some of Diaz's antics kind of made him laugh. Where they, and I thought he was in complete control of the fight. And
I thought there was going to be a bigger size difference, though, didn't you? The one shocking thing, I thought Masvidal was going to be much bigger than Diaz.
Well, Diaz is taller and longer as far as on the cables. When they measure him. So, so there's that factor. But yeah, I think it showed in the clinches that Masvidal was a lot stronger. A lot stronger. Just his posture and stuff lets you know
he had a good squeeze. Yeah,
wasn't in the strength department was there, and that's a tough thing. Absorbing punishment to go into rounds 4 and 5 and think you still are going to have enough when you haven't dealt out much punishment. Some of the body shots, even in the boxing, Diaz always, the thing about that impressed me was George's boxing. Yeah, he got tagged a little bit, and what I think he realized when he got hit was that Diaz couldn't hurt him. Maybe adrenaline, maybe that, but he wasn't going to get hurt, which allowed him to mix it up. And then his boxing became, pretty devastating for MMA. And
he's a sniper. Dude's a sniper.
Because he took some body shots in there, He walked out with Roberto Duran in his corner, a little, I know that you're a fan there too, so. George checked off all the boxes as far as I'm concerned, and I could see why Dana would want. Like Dana's got something in mind for Masvidal.
Okay, wait. Let's go back to my original question. Let's pretend Nate Diaz pulls it off. Who's calling out Nate Diaz for that belt?
Yeah, no, I think that belt goes away.
Okay,
Because
who? Give me a name.
yeah, no,
You're not going to say McGregor. McGregor's not going to come out of your mouth. If Diaz won that fight last night, his very next bout would have been with Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I think that's the only logical name that comes up. I think McGregor's kind
And
of
Conor would want that fight.
yeah, and Diaz is the one he'll want. Masvidal, you should probably stay away from.
It's too big. It's too big.
The situation there is now we've got this kind of ending, and I think Dana's got something in mind for Masvidal. I'm not sure what it is, but he seemed to hint at it in some of the post-fight, things where it's like there's big things coming for him. And
well, here, what's your opinion? Here, give me a few names.
I mean, to me, the thing is I like Masvidal and where he is in a position here, and the UFC should recognize this same thing, is that what's happened with him is very organic.
He's moving the needle.
Yeah, and it's been something that they haven't been trying to push, Like with McGregor, at some point, you kind of, when they took him out and the Fertittas redid his entire wardrobe to match his beard, you know what I mean? Then I think they were putting a little bit behind McGregor, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Masvidal didn't get any of that type of treatment. So,
well, you know what's strange about Masvidal is, have you been to his YouTube channel?
but yeah, I've seen a few of the videos.
Okay. He is putting tons and tons of content on there right now,
Yeah.
and he's doing his own promotion. Like, he's promoting himself better than the UFC is promoting him on his own YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, I think that comes with the 16 years of experience, and there comes a point where you do have to take it to the next level. Social media is one of those things. I'll give you an old Bodog story. The first season of the Bodog story, there was a social media type of get people to text a response and stuff, and most of the fighters got between 103 to 400 votes.
Oh, I remember that. Wait, who won? Nick Thompson was in the running. Charles McCarthy won that.
No. The guy who wiped everybody out was Chael Sonnen, a guy who later on would become a media genius, right?
No, wait. Charles McCarthy got caught fraudulently gaining votes, and you guys wiped his vote count down, and Chael Sonnen won. There was something crazy with that.
It may be like that, but Sonnen's was legit, right? And then the other guy that showed himself was Brad Pickett, the British fighter. Those are the two guys that managed social media 10 years ago at a far advanced level than the other people. Now it's just part of what the guys have to bring. And I'm glad George stepped it up because he's got the stories and the personality and stuff. I enjoyed one of his stories there was the toughest fight he ever did was where he was scared was against Steve Edwards. And I was the matchmaker for that. So,
Well, you were also the matchmaker for him and Keith Wisniewski as well.
Yeah, I mean, I probably matchmade 15 fights for George,
That's crazy.
So yeah, I know George pretty well. And I thought this fight, that he looks like, right now he really looks like the picture of a guy who's put it all together. He really has all the pieces together. He's going to be confident. They could mess up and put him in with the wrong opponent. But I think that, to me, what I would do with him is I would tell him, you're the bad boy, you're the BMF, go beat up Leon Edwards and let's headline London.
All right, so do you think that there's going to be other BMF matches? Do you think that's going to be the new belt for like super fights?
If I were the UFC, I'd retire it immediately.
Altogether?
Yeah, I know
monster hit.
There's a certain amount of there's really, it's a monster hit that could go wrong too fast. The problem for me is like, if you legitimately want to talk about like, street cred kind of guys that could go for this like baddest motherfucker, it's like
He had
you've
East
got
and West Coast shirts on these guys. You see that?
you've got American street cred, and that's very powerful for as a selling point and stuff like that. But do you want to really get into street cred with like Khabib and like guys who went through civil wars and machine guns and military level training and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's
Street cred, I don't even want to bring into the sport. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
and, and it gets worse from there. Believe me. McGregor also brings an aspect of that, kind of mafioso
Or even
Irish.
Till. Look at Till.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the BMF title continuing. No.
You know what, man? You make a really strong argument for that. I'm sitting here looking at the the positives, but
I know Eddie Alvarez very well. Eddie's got real Philly street cred. 50 fights on the street and stuff like that.
well,
And he's a kid. He's a street kid, just like Nate was, just like those other kids were.
here,
He's got some street cred, right? But now
here, can I give you an example of street cred that we saw on that card? Derek Lewis, his opponent, was it Ivanov? What was his name?
Lago, yeah.
Okay.
That's a tough dude.
Okay, so not only does he have stab wounds all over his chest and marks on the back of his head from getting hit with rocks in the back of his head, but if you look at his neck, he's also got the trachea scar, which is when somebody stabs you in the neck in order to insert a tube so they can breathe for you. That guy, on top of taking an amazing amount of punishment from Derek Lewis, his street cred is his body of work is just his physical appearance. That is scary.
Yeah, and the fact is, yeah, I like everything about Blago. This fight, I was very sad with the Ben Rothwell fight because I know Rothwell well, and I thought it was just not a great fight. But this fight, I think the guy showed everything. When Derek Lewis hits you, his head didn't even move. I mean, this was not a guy that was going to go out. He maybe blinked. He'd blink, but he would come forward. He would come at you. He never backed off. And I enjoyed the fight. I don't know that the right guy won.
I couldn't believe the amount, because Lewis got him a couple times. Dude, Lewis he's a throwback fighter. He's a pride throwback fighter. But I'll tell you this right now, Lewis is no punk. And,
No.
And Lewis caught him.
A guy, like if you need like a 747 moved and all you have is like a harness, Derek Lewis will move it for you. You know what I mean? Just let him walk a couple of foot. You know what I mean? It's like that guy is a monster. And Ivanov was not intimidated at all. I really, really enjoyed. I forget the end. Maybe it was the second round. I don't want to confuse rounds, but the sequence where Lewis had his best round and he hurt Ivanov. But at the end, Ivanov, there was a scramble and Ivanov wound up on top. And he kind of paused when the fight ended and he kind of looked at him and he was like, hey, I'm still here, dude. That was all he wanted to communicate, but he stayed kind of close to him, let him know, hey, I'm around. I'm not going away. And I thought that was, it's rare for a heavyweight fight to
go like that.
For it to be three compelling rounds. Usually it's like, here goes round three. But this one captured me, and both guys did a good job.
And the thing with Ivanov is, can you imagine going back to your corner? If you're Derek Lewis, you go back to your corner and they go, what happened? Did that punch not land? Oh no, I got him with everything. You got him with everything? Oh yeah, no, I got him with everything. Well, what happened? Oh, nothing. I got to go back out there for another round. That's got to be an unsettling feeling in your stomach. And do you know what it reminded me of? Do you remember a turn-of-the-century fighter named Joe Grimm?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Joe Grimm essentially was 10 wins, 500 losses. But what he would do is, his claim to fame was, you couldn't knock him out. And I'm not talking low-level guys. You could say, well, he only had 10 wins and he had, 500 losses. And that's not an exaggerated record. He may have literally had 500 losses, and he'd only been knocked out one time. And he fought Bob Fitzsimmons, he fought Jack Johnson, and both of those guys almost lost to him being exhausted from pounding on him. And meanwhile, the guy's 160, 165 pounds. You know, Jack Johnson said, I don't think that man is from this planet. He would just he'd knock him down 17 times in 6 rounds. And he would laugh maniacally, get up, and run at him again. I mean, it's just, I think Ivanov has that ability.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where it's like, as you pointed out, you know, a lot of the times, you know, it's very interesting when real life creeps in, and like I said, when you start talking street cred, American guys, and you can talk about the roughest and toughest American guys have it good. You know, I guess Tim Kennedy, you know, guys that maybe did time in Iraq and things like that. That's it, but that's not street cred. That's, you know, military work. You know, that's not
You're
street
military.
Cred.
It's a fancy way of saying you're capable of being a murderer.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But
or qualified to be one.
But with Ivanov, you know, Ivanov really is sitting there, and that look at the end of round 2 against Derek Lewis was like, you know, it really was like, you know, he you know, touching his trachea scar, you know, maybe he just was like, hey, that wasn't that bad, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you know, I've seen worse, you know. So, because I really literally don't know, you know, don't know how to take that fight. And I as a judge, I think I would have given it to Ivanov for the fight. And you know, Lewis, I know is likable and stuff like that. He was very funny.
Oh,
In
his post fight,
trying to punch him in the hole in his chest. You know, God damn. The whole thing was just a novel heavyweight fight. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Now, one other thing I wanted to cover here, and we touched upon it a little bit, and was another instance where I think the refereeing and the commission showed themselves to be a little weak, and that was in the Johnny Walker fight. Walker fighting Corey Anderson. Now, hear me out. You know, I think Anderson had the fight in hand, especially, you know, when you consider that
A lot of time left.
Yeah, there was a lot of time left. He'd already done the damage. His game plan was coming to fruition, and there's nothing feels better in a fight than when, you know, everything you've been
You're
told.
hitting. Yeah.
Everything, you know. And the bottom line is Walker was known as chinny. If you go back in his career, he had a couple losses early, and apparently they were knockouts. Anderson had seen them and knew that he was open to a right hand. Anderson, not really a knockout artist, but he knew that he was going to get him. And Walker was dinged up, and he was starting to get Amir Khan on us, where, you know, the legs go and you start to really get sloppy, and it's very obvious he's hurt, right? Very important for a fighter to hide. That's the thing, is if you hurt Ivanov, you don't know it, right? Walker, the minute you heard him, you knew it, and Anderson, you know, stayed with the game plan and did the job. But at the end of the day, Walker was up on his feet, throwing bombs, trying to hold the other guy off, and lucid. Yeah, he was a little dinged up, and he did take a shot right there, but I don't like that stop.
No,
I
don't.
It might have only ended 30 seconds later, but
Yeah,
I don't like that stop.
No, I don't like the stoppage either, but here we go. Like, if I'm going to make any critique on that fight whatsoever, let's call it what it is. The winner of that fight gets John Jones, right?
I mean, you got Dominic Reyes in there, you know.
Okay, but the winner of that fight probably is going to be fighting John Jones. If not next fight, the one after that. And Corey Anderson is a beast. Like, he's a legitimate monster. And see, if I'm going to make a critique, it's going to be about the matchmaking. You know, Johnny Walker has got a lot of hype behind him. He's got a fan base, like immediate fan base. He's got like an entrance. He's got the look. You know, he's got a lot going on there. He's got that punk rock thing. For them, after his surgery and about a year off, to serve him up Corey Anderson, I think that was as a regional matchmaker with the understanding of what a ticket seller and an A side of a card, you know, might require to have. I think they did him an injustice, because that guy, I mean, out of everybody on that card, you know, you're talking about Masvidal being organic and coming forward, which obviously is true. You know, Johnny Walker also has that it factor, and he was right there as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think Corey Anderson did the job. I think he walked into the fight with maybe everybody not expecting him to win, and he said, "Look, I'm the veteran here. You know, I've got UFC time, and that's meaningful. And this guy hasn't fought, and you know." And the bottom line is there was the hope that we would see Walker in an extended fight, and once again we were robbed of that. But I feel
It's true.
yeah, I sort of feel like you know, up against that fence, Walker was up, and when the referee stopped it, Walker was right there like that. Tells me he was lucid. If he could have hung on, maybe he can write a nice story and a comeback story, and then you've got the fighter you can market. But again, the commission and the lack of I don't know what it is, but you know, they don't have a lot of UFC level fights in New York, and those referees can't have a lot of MMA experience. And you know, when you opt for the side of caution, sometimes, you know, now you've taken a guy like Johnny Walker and probably set him back, you know, considerably. I'm not saying he was going to come back. Anderson, like I said, was very impressive from the get-go on that fight, but I would have given him more of a chance. And the Diaz fight, I think I might have rolled the dice and let it go on as well. But, you know, that's just...
Hey. Yeah, I'm in. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you, you know, for sure. But at the end of the day, I thought it was a phenomenal card.
Now, Till and Gastelum was the co-feature. Let's get into that
Gastelum.
one.
Yeah, Gastelum.
I can say it how I want. I don't care how you say it.
So you're from New York, living in Latin America, right? I'm not, as strange as this sounds, Gastelum's a bad boy, right?
Yeah, the problem to me in this fight really fast is he needed a little more time off just to rest his body and mind after the Adesanya fight, and I think he came in and it was like he'd already shot his load.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sold on Till. Yeah, I'm not sure why, but I'm not.
No, I agree with you. Till didn't do much to win that fight. Certainly, you know. I mean, he except nullify. You know, Gastelum didn't get off in any way, shape, or form in any way dangerous, but neither really did Till. Till's big for even as a middleweight. He looked big, which means he was a huge lightweight. But welterweight. But to me, you kind of say, all right, if he's not dehydrated from the weight class, you kind of want to see like a next level type of performance, like you know, like Cerrone when his first few 170-pound fights and they went well for him and stuff. You know, there are good examples of guys that adapt real well to the new weight class. And this was not one of those examples. Till he got the win and stuff, and, you know, at the end of the day, he's unscathed.
Hey, you know, I'd say where the reason I'm not sold on him, where it comes from, is whenever somebody is, like, hyper emotional and they kind of go off the rails, it's either, one, you need to be on medication, or you're nervous about being in the position you're in and you don't belong there. Like you've kind of faked your way there. Like you don't believe you're supposed to be there. And he so much so admitted that as well. You know, like, yeah, I was going to fake an injury and I just, you know, my head is in a different place. And, you know, and you can see that whenever somebody's as emotional like that, it's easier to get in one of their heads than say somebody that's a little bit more stoic and reserved. Like getting in, you know, Ivanov or Derek Lewis's head, it's not happening, man. You're not getting in their head. But Till, you can rattle him. He's fragile.
That's an interesting thing. You know what? That brings to mind the Stephen Thompson fight with Vicente Luque, because you know that was a fight where Thompson had a lot of questions coming in for some of the very same reasons and stuff.
Kevin Lee and Gregor too.
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin Lee and Gregor was another exciting fight, but really fast. So to talk about Thompson, Thompson was a guy with a lot of questions coming off of the losses and stuff. Now he comes in and Luque sort of tags him early in the fight, and he really looks to unravel. He really looked like he unraveled a little bit, and then he came back and he completely snapped back to his game plan. I give him a lot of credit for that. Because he came back and he realized he took control of the fight again, was able to break through, get some damage done on Luque, and slow Luque down enough that he was able to perform the way he performs the whole time. And I think Stephen Thompson did a terrific job in that fight because in round one, there was a point where it looked like it was Luca's fight to lose.
Well, you got to look at. If I wanted to sit down with, if I had to pick one person to sit down on that card with, Stephen Thompson would be like my number one pick. I mean, obviously you got Masvidal, you got Nate Diaz, who phenomenal interviews, but Stephen Thompson is actually an intriguing interview because he's a Taekwondo guy. So to prepare for a Taekwondo guy, you got to go to a McDojo and just pray to God that somebody there knows what they're actually doing. And the way he adapted like an MMA style to it, he's impossible to prepare for. I mean, it's a look you're not going to see in the gym. And his father is still in his corner, and his father, another Taekwondo guy, and it's really kind of easy just to kind of dump on the early, traditional mixed martial art guys. But at the end of the day, they're like you and I, man. Like they wanted to get in there and fight. That's what they wanted to do. And unfortunately, MMA wasn't available. It didn't exist. So they found other avenues and paths to go down. Well, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's father continued to adapt. And what he has made and created with his son is incredibly impressive. Like, it really is. And Luke, I mean, he was a guy with a lot of upside. If he beat Stephen Thompson, I truly believe that he was on his way to becoming a household name. It was one of those benchmarks that he had to push forward on, and unfortunately, he ran into somebody that's just so unorthodox that it's difficult to, he's real difficult to train for. I mean, Stephen Thompson's filthy. He's clean. He's crisp. He looks, handsome. That dude's a filthy fighter, man. He taps, gets your rhythm. As soon as he understands where your movements are, he drops the hammer. That dude's a filthy fighter, man. Phenomenal athlete.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the fight, and I got into a rut where I thought that he was bored. There were a couple of performances there, maybe it was flat and stuff like that, but he won me over this time. So let's get into
Tyron Woodley, the first fight.
Yeah, we got to blame Woodley, I guess. Woodley, I think, is to blame.
Yeah, I mean, Tyron Woodley, but the first time that they fought was one of the, in my opinion, was fight of the year. Yeah, the second one, all right, you got me. It was a snoozer, but that first one was fight of the year. And Tyron's got an entire laundry list of those. And I'm a fan of the guy, but he's got a laundry list of those.
Yep. Now, let's go ahead and touch, as we start to wrap up here, on the Kevin Lee Gregor Gillespie fight you talked about here, because this was one where, first of all, both guys should get gobs of credit, right? Gillespie stepping up, that step in class of competition was a big step. And for Kevin Lee, also not afraid of putting himself in a dangerous position, coming off of losses and, returning to a weight class. A lot of X factors.
And he had 2 losses.
Yeah, a lot of X factors, both ways. Both guys really not in a position where a loss was going to be easily absorbed. It derails Gillespie now. He's no longer undefeated. Now he's, just another 33-year-old on the roster kind of thing. You know what I mean? And because at 33 now with 14 fights, he may be a little bit behind the learning curve, so to speak, as a crossover guy from wrestling. So that derails him big time. And I think Kevin Lee, he's so young and is such an athlete and stuff like that. He may have been able to survive a loss here and still stay on the roster, but it just changes your whole perspective. It's double the pay, and then it affects the pay of your next fight, whether you get a raise or not, and this, that, and the other stuff. And he needed to win bad because it's okay to be a guy earmarked for potential and stuff like that, but at some point, it's best in the UFC to start notching wins. So for Kevin Lee, my hat's off to him.
Yeah, that Gregor Gillespie, he had such an upside where like the industry insiders were all putting their money on him, going, man, that's the next chosen one. That's the next guy to win, the belt off somebody because he's got such high wrestling credentials. I guess he got a good pedigree. I think what is he training? I'm going off the top of my head right now. I think he's training with Matt. Who's in his corner?
I didn't see who was in his corner, but yeah, I do think he's a Cerro Longo and
I
from
think he's a
that.
Cerro Longo guy. I'm don't mark my words. I'm almost positive. I'm going from memory of something I looked up maybe several months ago, and he was one of the guys that they say that's the next chosen one. This is the guy. This is the guy. Like people were, bending the knee, so to say. And you had two high level wrestlers in a boxing match, which generally is what happens when you put two higher level wrestlers together. And that's a scary knockout that he got cracked with. Like
Yeah,
that's that's one of those knockouts like Ben Askren. All right, he just lost to Damian Maia. You're not going to tell me Jorge Masvidal still was not in that cage with him that fight. Like it was still haunting him. So was it as bad as that? No, but it was that's an ugly knockout. That's one of those knockouts that you got to take about 6. You got to take about 6 months off of any road work or any jostling of your head.
yeah, and Gillespie, he may be a mercenary kind of guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't say that bad, but when you're 33 years old and you're now, it's still now you're set back a little bit like that. If your goal was to get to the top and stuff like that, maybe you want to reassess because it is not going to be easier at this
It's a
point.
hard road.
Yeah, it's good, and now you've tasted a little bit of what comes next. It is a different sport. You can't rely. And the thing is in this fight, obviously you got to set it up, and MMA is different and things like that. But Gillespie, I don't know if he fell in love with his boxing or what the deal was, but I don't know why he would try so few takedowns against the guy with 7 inches of reach on
him. Yeah, that's foolish.
So, any final comments on UFC 244? And I'll leave you with one last question. So, Masvidal Diaz 2. Do you run it right back? When do you do it? Or do you hold off on it and see what happens?
You got to let Diaz sit for a minute. Do you know what I would do? I'd let Nick fight him.
Yeah, I thought that was what was coming. As the fight was progressing and George was looking strong, I thought that was a natural fallback. And it would have been interesting to see, Nate Diaz is never going to, the thing about it, I think this was the most respectful I've seen Nate Diaz. I
guess that's two gangsters in there.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is with the street cred that George has, at what point does that I don't give a fuck anymore attitude come up? Like if Nate's on the floor, bleeding. The fight's over. The decision went George's way. George is all happy. Nate hits the ring. Nick hits the ring rather with all the emotions going. What would have happened in that interaction? I think could have very easily set up that fight. The fact is if you think you haven't seen Nate Diaz in a while, Nick is even more like Bigfoot. You know what I mean? It's
he is on punishment. Nick Diaz is. He's literally being punished by the UFC. They are making him sit out his entire contract.
He served suspensions for weed and stuff like that. It just seems to be the kind of thing where it's like, Nick, I hope he has some money. I hope he, they really did start a cannabis company with the money they have and that they're set and stuff. And then, he can go off and do his Iron Man stuff and be just as satisfied, physically and stuff like that, then maybe we don't see him again. But I think
Nate kept talking about his brother. There was a reason for that. There was a reason for that. So
yeah, I think the thing is every time there's an anti-upper, and it looks like you're going to be able to cash a bigger McGregor aside, who are the big guys grabbing the biggest paychecks in the UFC? Could it be the Diaz brothers? Once they get all their, they pop up every few years and generate the level of hype that they have. And then they go off for a few years, basically living off the money they made, right? So. I don't know. I think in this fight, Nate is going to break some records, and if Nick were to come back to try to avenge the family name or the
Break some records how?
What was that?
You break some records how?
I think that this pay-per-view that will probably come in besides the McGregor pay-per-views and the Lesnar pay-per-view. I think this will come in as a top 5 all-time UFC pay-per-view.
Okay. So you've got a made-up belt between two journeymen as a headline, be a top 5 pay-per-view, and you're going to tell me that the BMF belt is going away?
No, I'm telling you, it should go away.
Oh,
I don't care about all that stuff.
even if it's once a year, that belt should hang around once a year.
There's a couple of things. It's like here's the thing. It's like there's a point where I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know?
Okay, wait. Let me continue.
Like, was it like what? Why? What the fuck was The Rock doing there? Like, what importance? What does that mean to me? What is it's a waste of time and stuff like that. But it's like that was the hype. They spent time talking about The Rock and his shit in post-fight press conferences.
Well,
and that's just so out of place to me. But that's the level of hype that this type of stuff generates and stuff, and that's, I guess, what you need nowadays.
Yeah. Well, you got to look at it this way too. They went up against Canelo Alvarez and Kovalev this same exact night. You're telling me it's a top 5 pay-per-view? Like, I'm sitting here because I'm a boxing fan, much like yourself, just thinking, how does boxing allow this to happen? Like, the UFC literally said, yeah, we don't care what you're doing. They never would have done that before. They went up against those two guys, that title fight, with two journeymen and smoked them. That's wild.
They knew what they had, though. They knew what they had. And, I mean, the guy, it's the right place at the right time. They've identified that, in a number of occasions. And in this particular case, with Masvidal, they went ahead and pulled the trigger and did the fight. In some other occasions, they've had guys become the hot name, and they sometimes don't pull the trigger, and you don't get a fight that you want. This one, kind of made itself for him.
That's wild. All right, well, Miguel, always a pleasure, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us. That's been Mike Davis from the Fighters Corner podcast. You can check out his stuff over on the YouTube channel, Fighters Corner podcast. Incredible interviews. Vinny Paz, Montel Griffin, Ken
good stuff, right?
West Chin, MMA, boxing, but real deep dive interviews. You want to check out the Caro Parisian interview, for example, to talk about old school stuff. Great stuff over at Fighters Corner. And I'm Miguel Iturrate. You can check out our stuff at the Cage Rage podcast. And we've been wrapping up the UFC 244, probably the best UFC card of 2019.
Absolutely.
Mike,
be good. That's it. Be good, brother.
Take it easy, and we'll be right back with some Canelo and Kovalev post-fight stuff as well. Talk to you guys later.